After arriving at the apartment complex, Chun Jingguan was the first to say his farewell and heads for his room to rest and heal. And Zhang Yi's entire team, right on cue, followed immediately after, silently returning to their rooms. However, Xiao Honglian and Xing Tian, being on the same floor as Zhang Yi, quietly followed behind him. Staring at Zhang Yi's departing figure, Xiao Honglian, due to the earlier exchange with Zhang Yi, hesitated to voice her concerns about the future situation of Tianhai City. It was vastly different from the past, and each of the three major bases were no longer a powerful force to be reckoned with. Even now, facing the oppression of the three major factions in Days City, they can only endure the humiliation silently. To put it bluntly, even if the three of them joined forces, their strength was still not as good as that of one before the zombie crisis. Relying on Zhang Yi's strength is their best and only option. Xing Tian noticed Xiao Honglian's demeanor and knew exactly what her concerns were. After all, they were the same as his. Things are different now, and we can't rely too much on Zhang Yi, he said. We might as well take this opportunity to think carefully about our future. The scene shifts to a while later. Everyone in Zhang Yi's team had gathered in his room. After closing the doors and windows, Liang Yu was the first to ask, Zhang Yi, when do we take action? Zhang Yi is not the kind of person who would just accept things as they come. How could he remain indifferent when others bullied him? The reason he didn't let his anger get the better of him at that time was solely because it was not the right time to do so. Zhang Yi sat on his bed, and when he heard this, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. We can't be the first party to take the initiative. We need to wait for them to make the first move. Really? Wait for them to make the first move? Liang Yu couldn't help but frown, and the others were also curious about Zhang Yi's decision. Wouldn't we be in a passive position in this way? Zhang Yi looked at everyone with a smile. Oh, then tell me, what should we do? The always frightened Chunlei stood up boldly at this time with his clenched fist raised. He gritted his teeth and said, those guys are so hateful. They humiliated us in front of so many people. I couldn't stand it. If you ask me, we might as well run to their way back to Days City in advance and kill them all. Chunlei looked at Zhang Yi and smiled. After all, with your strength, isn't it easy to kill them? Hearing this, Zhang Yi couldn't help asking, oh, do you know their strength? Chunlei was speechless. How could he know the strength of the mutant organizations in Days City? Seeing Chunlei lost for words, Zhang Yi asked again, do you know my strength? Chunlei was about to say something, but when he saw Zhang Yi's playful eyes, he closed his mouth tactfully. The others also looked at Zhang Yi, intending to listen to what he would do next. Zhang Yi said to them seriously, since we are all on the same side, I will tell you the truth. First of all, my strength is not as strong as Yuan Kongye's. Her origin that was devoured by me was already incomplete. This may be related to her supernatural attributes. So, don't think that I now have the strength of an Epsilon mutant. In fact, I can only be regarded as a relatively strong existence in Delta. Also, don't underestimate anyone. You have seen Sun Jianming's strength. He can completely defeat Qin Jingguan. As for the leaders of the other two forces, I am afraid they are not much different from him. It is very stupid to act rashly before figuring out the other party's ability. And we are going to kill them without knowing anything? Isn't this blind arrogance? Zhang Yi's words gave his team a very strange feeling. For some reason, they all subconsciously thought that Zhang Yi's strength had reached, or at least was close to, the level of Yuan Kongye. Yuan Kongye's destructive power left a deep impression on them. So much so that they thought that Zhang Yi could also slaughter mutants below Epsilon by himself. But it sounded completely different at this moment. Zhou Qir was smart enough to realize the problem. In fact, if you think about it carefully, even if we take into account the forces of the three major bases, we still have a big gap with the other side in terms of overall strength. The only advantage is that Zhang Yi's strength is above theirs. But we are only analyzing this through common sense, and we can't even be sure of their abilities. Therefore, it is not a wise move to attack rashly and go over to kill them in advance. Zhang Yi nodded approvingly. He looked at his team and said with a smile, you guys are all blinded by anger. Remember my words, to survive in the apocalypse you must always stay rational. Zhang Yi's explanation convinced everyone. This was also his usual style of doing things. He would neither put himself in danger because of complacency, nor would he think of himself as invincible. Yuan Kongye was the perfect example. She claimed to be invincible at the beginning, but later died at the hands of Zhang Yi, who was far inferior to her in strength. Zhang Yi will not make the same mistake. After all, no matter how powerful a lion is, it will hunt its prey with all its strength. Don't worry. Instead of rushing to find them angrily and exposing our flaws, it is better to wait for them to tire themselves out and fight on our home turf. Zhang Yi spoke with a smile, his eyes flashing with wisdom. In fact, he already had a plan to deal with those people in his mind. Chunlei laughed and said knowingly, "Boss, I knew you wouldn't let them go so easily." Zhang Yi shrugged with his arms folded. "Well, it would be better to say that they will definitely come to die." Zhang Yi slowly narrated his plan. Their arrogance just now was just to test the strength of Tianhai City. Now that Chen Jingguan has been beaten up and we chose to be tolerant after being ridiculed, they will think that Tianhai City is weak and can be bullied. Soon, they will definitely choose to invade Tianhai City. You know, Tianhai City is our home ground. As long as they come, we will make sure they never return. Zhang Yi's smile became stronger. By that time, in our territory, even these three factions can send more troops and use more of their own resources. We just need to wait for them to tire themselves out and take advantage of the geographical advantages. This way, eliminating them would be easier, wouldn't it? After Zhang Yi was done laying out his plan, everyone in the room couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. "This is wonderful. Your method is still the best. I was also mad at them just now and wanted to fight them. But fighting them on our home turf, we can lure the enemy into a trap, with a greater chance of victory and less casualties." Everyone admired Zhang Yi's way of thinking, especially his calm state of mind. After all, not everyone can remain rational when being ridiculed in person. Lu Karen looked at Zhang Yi curiously and asked, "If that's the case, then why don't you explain it clearly to Xiao Honglian and the others?" A faint smile crept up on Zhang Yi's lips. "There were so many people outside just now. How can I just casually tell them my plan? I will tell them about this after returning to Tianhai City, and let them cooperate with this operation. It's better and more secure this way. Also, this will make them remember it for a long time. Let them know what level of strength they are now, and who they can rely on." Tianhai City was too comfortable before, and there was no invasion by other cities. Although the three major bases were willing to respect Zhang Yi, they had some illusions and were unwilling to completely hand over all power to him. However, with the threat from the mutant organizations in Day City looming over their heads, they will understand how important Zhang Yi was to them. This is a warning to them to make them more obedient. When Lu Karen thought over Zhang Yi's words, she exclaimed in excitement and admiration, "Big brother, you truly are worthy of being the boss. You always think long-term." Zhang Yi playfully patted her on the head and replied with a smile, "Well, everyone has been busy all day, so you all should go and rest early." With that being said, the group left Zhang Yi's room with a smile on their faces, a stark contrast to their earlier demeanor. "By the way," he said, "tell the people from the other three forces not to go out during this period if they have nothing to do. People from other cities should wait and see what happens in Tianhai City, and don't let others make a fool of you." Before leaving, Zhou Qir told Zhang Yi to get some needed rest also. Shortly after they left, Zhang Yi called Bailey Chongqing, but was told that they were still busy at the operations center at the moment. "Anyway, what can I do for you?" Zhang Yi wanted to know if their sudden urgency was related to the Ronin organization in Linhai City. Bailey Chongqing reminded Zhang Yi in a deep voice, "This matter is far more serious than you think. I can't say more, otherwise it will be crossing the line. You've got to decide for yourself." Bailey Chongqing's friendship with him was not very deep, but he owed him a favor. Being able to remind him to this extent was almost equivalent to telling him clearly that this mission to encircle and suppress Eclipse Moon was very dangerous. Zhang Yi immediately understood and thanked Bailey Chongqing. He hung up the phone and fell on his bed helplessly with a light thud. He planned to wait and see how this matter develops for the time being. Only then would he take action accordingly. If the top leaders of Blizzard City forces him to take action, they must provide sufficient information and combat readiness resources. After all, Zhang Yi neither fights unprepared battles nor fights battles without confidence. After their brief exchange, Bailey Chongqing could not be contacted for the time being, and Zhang Yi estimated that Deng Shintong was also busy. After all, there were only people from their two investigation teams in Blizzard City now, and Zhang Yi did not have Deng Shintong's contact information, so he could only decide to wait a few more days. If no one came to find him, Zhang Yi would go back to Tianhai City. Later that day, Zhang Yi was awakened from his dreamless sleep by a continuous knock on his door. Wondering who it might be, he got up, but the moment he got closer to the door, he heard Chen Jingguan's voice. Zhang Yi thought Chen Jingguan probably wanted to ask him to help him get revenge on Sun Jianming. If that's the case, Zhang Yi plans to just open the door and say a few words to get rid of him. But unexpectedly, after Chen Jingguan was allowed to enter, he immediately knelt down on both knees in front of Zhang Yi's shocked gaze. Chen Jingguan took a moment and spoke very sincerely. "Mr. Zhang Yi, please take over Morning Dew Base." Zhang Yi was totally stunned when he heard this. After hearing Chen Jingguan's words clearly, he knew why he did so. Zhang Yi stared down at Chen Jingguan silently and expressionlessly. He immediately knew that Chen Jingguan must have figured it out that Morning Dew Base would perish in his hands sooner or later. Only with his strength can Morning Dew Base still have hope of survival. Zhang Yi remained calm and secretly calculated the gains and losses of taking over Morning Dew Base. As for the loss, he had to take care of their lives. Although it was a bit troublesome, Morning Dew Base was self-sufficient and didn't have any major issues. All he needed to do was to make sure the base wasn't attacked by other forces. If Zhang Yi were to take over, the people there who are proficient in sailing and fishing can be used by him. If he needed to go out to sea one day, these people would be very useful. This was a very cost-effective deal since he was going to deal with their current enemies anyway. However, he could not agree so readily. Zhang Yi was silent for a long time, which made Chen Jingguan, who was kneeling on the floor, feel uneasy. Zhang Yi would not look down on my base, would he? He silently thought. And speaking of which, their team is all elites, and there is no shortage of supplies. It would not be surprising if he looked down on my base. But right now, he is the only person I can rely on. At this time, Zhang Yi's voice sounded from above his head. Get up first. Tell me, what do you think about this matter? Zhang Yi walked to his bed and sat down. Chen Jingguan looked up when he heard this. Seeing Zhang Yi's indifferent expression, he couldn't see his thoughts clearly. Chen Jingguan stood up and walked over with some worry. Sitting opposite to Zhang Yi, Chen Jingguan had already thought of his words in his mind. So he told Zhang Yi about his plan. We have been in the fleet of Morning Dew Base for 7 years and have a deep affection for this fleet. Now that Wei Dinghai has died, I have to shoulder the heavy responsibility of being the leader of the base. But my strength is not good enough, and now it is due to my mistakes that people are looking down on Morning Dew Base. In the current chaotic world, there must be someone eyeing the fat piece of meat of Morning Dew Base. I believe it won't be long before they will invade. Chen Jingguan clenched his hands on his knees. We don't have the ability to protect ourselves now. If Morning Dew Base is destroyed, the old brothers in the fleet don't know what fate they will face. So I hope that Mr. Zhang Yi can take over as the leader of Morning Dew Base and protect the brothers and sisters in the base. Zhang Yi nodded slightly. What you said seems to make sense. Once the foreign enemies invade, no one knows what they will do after occupying Morning Dew Base. If they encounter a brutal enemy, they may even carry out a massacre. Morning Dew Base not only has soldiers and technical workers, but also their families, the elderly, the weak, women, and children. Once the base is captured, will people from other forces offer support? The answer is obvious. After all, one shouldn't gamble on human nature, because gambling dogs will not have a good end. Although Zhang Yi was very cruel, ruthless, and cunning on the battlefield, he does not kill innocent people indiscriminately. If he becomes the master of Morning Dew Base, the people there would be in safe hands. Zhang Yi suddenly laughed. You are smart. You know that I am lazy and don't like to manage so many people. Even if Morning Dew Base recognizes me as the master, it still has to be handed over to you to take care of it? Chen Jingguan said hurriedly. But if there is an order, you dare not disobey. As long as you can protect the safety of Morning Dew Base, we will meet all your requirements. Whether it is food, weapons and ammunition, or even women, we will offer them. Chen Jingguan continued in a serious tone. There are many beautiful women in our base. If you don't mind other people's wives, you can... No. Forget about women. Zhang Yi quickly interrupted him, waving his hand frantically. What kind of person does Chen Jingguan think I am? Women? Really? Don't you know that the ones in my family are enough to keep me busy? And I am not interested in breaking up other people's families. Chen Jingguan looked at Zhang Yi eagerly, his eyes full of pleading. Seeing this, Zhang Yi just smiled. Now, I presume you understand how much trouble you have caused. Chen Jingguan's face was gloomy. I know I was too impulsive. Zhang Yi folded his arms leisurely. It's no problem for me to become the owner of Morning Dew Base. Just hand over the keys. You see, there are 2 cores of Morning Dew Base. One is a fleet and the other is an underground shelter. The shelter has a special key, and only those who have the key can open the door. In other words, whoever has the key to the shelter is the real owner of the base. Zhang Yi learned about this from Xingtian. Chen Jingguan did not hesitate, and again, immediately got on his knees in front of Zhang Yi. He reached out from the interlayer pocket of his jacket and took out a black metal box and handed it to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi had seen the key to the shelter, and Chen Jingguan could not deceive him. This is a black box with 3 keys in it. Generally speaking, the 3 keys are kept by 3 people, and only by putting them all into the keycard slot in the box can you get the control of the shelter door. But now, all the keys are in Chen Jingguan's hands. He had 1 set in his care, and the other set was given to Zhang Yi. This means that from now on, Morning Dew Base is completely open to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi took the key and the controller. He looked at Chun Jingguan deeply, and then the black metal box disappeared in his palm, entering into his alternate space. Chun Jingguan's face was relieved, and he subconsciously let out a sigh of relief. He got up, lowered his head deeply, and showed his respect, thanking Zhang Yi. "Thank you, Chief." The moment Zhang Yi accepted the key, it meant that he had officially took over Morning Dew Base. Then, Zhang Yi tells him that he is still responsible for the daily management of the base. He will only intervene when an urgent issue arises or if he needs something. Chun Jingguan smiled and readily agreed to these terms. He regained the feeling of being a deputy. Sure enough, he didn't have the ability to be the boss yet, and it was best for him to follow one. "Boss, what should we do next? Should we go back to Tianhai City, or find an opportunity to kill those people in Days City?" Chun Jingguan asked anxiously. Zhang Yi replied calmly, "I will take care of this matter. I will personally deal with the group of people in Days City. Now you just need to go back and wait for me to notify you when to return to Tianhai City. I will tell you how to deal with Days City after we arrive in Tianhai City." Chun Jingguan was relieved when he saw Zhang Yi's confident look. Having dealt with Zhang Yi for so long, he knew his style of doing things. Therefore, he did not ask any more questions, but bowed deeply to Zhang Yi in a respectful manner. "Okay, you can leave now." Zhang Yi dismissed him with a wave of his hand. Chun Jingguan left the room immediately after. The next day, Bai Chunyu came to find him. The appearance of this member of the God team in the apartment complex caused a commotion among some people. After all, the 6 major investigation teams represent the external violence agencies of Blizzard City. Some people have dealt with them and know very well how terrifying these guys are. And the person Bai Chunyu was looking for was Zhang Yi, who was not well known and escaped like a coward without saying a word in front of the mutants in Days City. Bai Chunyu ignored their rumors and went straight to Zhang Yi's residence.